Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1021B, and today's date is July 13th, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. Signs Off on Expanding Military Forces Used by UN Troops. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we've been talking about how the government likes to spy on the American people, and they're doing it while they're violating our rights, and they really don't care. And they have all these laws that they set up where they have the ability to say, listen, we have this law, this is why we can do this. Well, they've taken it to the next level. And we can see with this new Pokemon Go app, and I'm sure many of you heard of it. And if you haven't heard of it, well, Pokemon Go, it's a game where one tracks virtual characters or objects that appear on their smartphones through real-world events. Now, James Corbett, he wrote a very interesting article about the Pokemon Go app. And there's a lot of people out there that are using it. And we have to look into what this really is. And when we do, we find that there's a lot of people connected to this. Firstly, the app requires an excessive amount of permissions on a user's device. It wants to read your contacts, find accounts on your device, wants to access your camera. The app even requires full access to a user's Google account, which it can then read your emails, send emails from your account, browse your Google Drive documents and photos. But this was a mistake, and they're saying they're going to correct this very soon. Secondly, the game's privacy policy contains such gems as, we may disclose any information about you that is in our possession or control to government or law enforcement officials or private parties. I mean, think about what they're saying right now. Now, the maker of the app, Niantic Labs, well, has anyone really heard of them before? No, most likely not. Well, the reason for that is because last year they were an internal startup of Google, the NSA-linked Big Brother company. Google remains one of Niantic's major backers. And the company was founded by John Hanke, who also founded Keyhole, the mapping company which was created with seed money from In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm, which was eventually rolled into Google Maps. So the Pokemon game, currently taking the internet by storm, is scooping up data including activity, movements, communication, and it was created by a CIA-linked businessman, and they're using this to spy on every single person. It's a backdoor approach. Forget about saying, okay, we need to get a warrant. Forget about saying, okay, we're going to use our systems in the NSA. Just create an app. And let me have full access to everything. And this is exactly what they've done. And this is why you all need to protect yourself one way or another. I don't like any apps access my information. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say out there, well, they have access anyhow. Well, you know what? You need to protect yourself any way you can. Guess what? You lock your doors in your house and your car. People still can break into it, but you're taking that step to protect yourself. So whatever you're using, you need to protect yourself one way or another, to fight back and say, listen, I'm standing up here for my rights. I'm saying I want privacy. I turn this off on purpose. And this is why you should use encryption. This is why you should use products like blockitpocket.com, which is a sleeve you can slip your cell phone into, your credit cards. It blocks the signal because it's interwoven with metals. And each person should take responsibility to say, listen, you're violating my rights. This is why I'm turning it off. You're violating my rights. This is why I'm blocking your signal. This is why I'm encrypting my email. This is why I'm locking my house, my car, because I don't want you to have access. Now, we know the government, they would love to get America fighting with each other. And they've been pushing for this. They tried many different times. Doesn't mean it's going to work, but their goal is to get this done. Now, very interestingly, Anonymous, they're calling for a nationwide day of rage on July 15th, this Friday. And I'm a little leery about this, because this would be an opportunity for the government to declare martial law, suspend the elections, suspend the Constitution. Now, am I saying this is going to happen? No. I'm saying this is an opportunity that they might seize upon, and they might use it to their advantage. Because what we're seeing right now, this is going to be taking place in many different cities. Now, we know Anonymous has done this before, where there were going to be a night of chaos. This was like a year or so ago. Nothing really happened. But this is something that we do need to watch. We see Phoenix. We see it in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver, Washington, Atlanta, Tampa, Orlando, Miami, Chicago, Baltimore, New York City. I mean, the major areas. And it looks like it's going to be starting anywhere from 5 to 7 p.m. in many, many different areas. If you want to see the entire list, you can come to the x22report.com site. Just click on this episode and you can see the entire list. And the reason we need to be concerned is because we realize that the government is pushing for some type of war against the people. Because all they have to do is plant some agent provocateurs in each one of these cities, have this erupt and riots break out in many different cities. If they can get enough cities, the president can step in and say, we need to declare martial law at this point. And this is something we need to watch this weekend. Now, the United States announced its support for a set of principles that will allow the United Nations peacekeeping troops and UN police to use force in order to protect civilians in the combat zones and areas of armed conflicts. Now, this is very interesting. What we're seeing right now is the U.S., the UN, they want to use the Kigali principles, which would make peacekeeping missions more effective, improve security, and save lives. The Kigali principles call for countries who contribute troops to the UN missions to give UN peacekeeping commanders the authority to use military force against armed actors with clear hostile intent to harm civilians. And they don't have to wait for approval from the United Nations. So they're able to react on their own. Now, the Kigali initiative was introduced by the United States, the Netherlands, and Rwanda in 2015. Now, absent from all of this is Russia, China, Iran, Lebanon, as well as a number of other countries. And this is going to give the United Nations a wider and seemingly more official, more powerful force than before. And they can act without getting permission. Now, the president on July 1st, he signed an executive order. United States policy on pre- and post-strike measures to address civilian casualties in U.S. operations involving the use of force, which fits into what they just did with the UN. So the question is, what are they planning for? We know that they can send UN troops into different countries, maybe like Syria, like Iraq, and have them protect civilians. And if anyone attacks them, now they're a force which is acting like troops who are fighting against whatever enemy is coming after them. Now, of course, it might be the people of the country, where they're fighting against the puppet governments, like in Yemen, like in Libya, like in Iraq, in Lebanon. Could be here in the United States, where there's rioting, people are using weapons, the police can't handle it, they bring in UN troops. We're going to protect these people right over here. And we don't have to get permission to fire upon those people who are trying to hurt these people. And this is a very dangerous situation that we're entering into. And this is something that we need to watch very, very carefully. Now, as we reported yesterday, in South Sudan, tensions are high, and it looks like war is being pushed in this area. And the South Sudan's Vice President, he has withdrawn his troops to the outside of Juba, saying that he's not planning for war, and it's not clear what is causing all of this. And I'm going to say it most likely is the United States government central bankers trying to create some type of conflict in the area. We see U.S. military, they're going to be sending in about 40 additional soldiers to South Sudan's capital to help American personnel and facilities there, because when the U.S. doesn't get what they want, they resort to a war type of scenario, to terrorism. And we can see this is what they're doing again in South Sudan, because we see China there, we see the U.S. there, and the U.S. wants full control. We see North Korea, they have chosen a location for their THAAD deployment. It's going to be in a remote mountainous area southeast of Seoul, and it'll be set up there. And of course, North Korea is going to respond to this later on. We see that the U.S. is continually keeping their troops inside Afghanistan and actually adding more troops. But they're doing something very interesting. They're not bringing the troops inside of Afghanistan. What they're doing is they're going to be keeping hundreds or thousands of troops outside Afghanistan. And when they are needed, they can be sent into Afghanistan. So people are going to say, well, how many troops we have in Afghanistan? Well, we only have 8,400. Not counting the 7,000 that we have outside of Afghanistan, where we rotate them in. Those we do not count. It's the same thing they do in Iraq. We have 4,600 or so permanent troops under the agreement with the Iraqi government. And then the rest are temporary, the other 6,000, 7,000, without any type of expiration date. So they're doing the same exact trick. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Kiev, they're going to set an objective to minimize the participation of the people in the Donbass area to get involved with elections. Now, we can see they're not following the Minsk II ceasefire agreement whatsoever. We're also seeing that Ukraine got a delivery of anti-tank missiles from Poland. And these are going to be used to shoot down Russian tanks. And we see right now that Putin, he's called Merkel and Hollande. He's concerned about all the shelling that's going on in Donbass right now. He's concerned about the lethal weapons that are being delivered to Kiev. He's concerned about the troops being moved up to the contact line. And he's continually saying that we need to complete the Minsk II ceasefire. Now, they've been saying this since the beginning of the Minsk II ceasefire. And guess what? It's not happening. Because one side doesn't want it completed. And that is the side of Kiev. They don't want to complete this. They want a major offensive. They want Crimea and they want the southeastern section. We see the South China Sea tensions. They are starting to surge. Taiwan deploys a frigate. China is warning that they're going to be setting up an air defense zone. And we can see this is exactly what the U.S. wants. By the ruling by The Hague, they are pushing their agenda to provoke China to the extreme. They're doing this with North Korea. They're doing this with Russia. And they're hoping that one of these countries eventually does something. Now, out in Yemen, we see the Houthi forces. They have imposed full control over several points along the Saudi border, and they're making a huge amount of progress, keeping the Saudi forces at bay, and they're taking over more and more locations inside Yemen. Erdogan is out there. He is saying that his government has never agreed to any deal with the Kurdistan Workers' Party or any other Kurdish party. They are our enemies, and we're going to take them down. We see out in Turkey, the French embassy in the Turkish capital of Ankara, well, they've closed it until further notice. And the celebrations that were supposed to be held on July 14th for the French holiday in Turkey, they're also canceled because of serious threats to the entire area. Now, we know the U.S. evacuated the men and women from the base inside Turkey. We understand France has closed their embassy. We know there's terrorist warnings going on throughout Turkey, throughout Europe, in Lebanon, in Libya, in Syria. The U.S. has their own warnings in the United States. And what we're seeing right now is they're getting prepared. When we start to see embassies close like this, when we see evacuations, when we see travel warnings to certain areas, telling everyone to keep out, when we see aircraft carriers coming in, military assets, drills, more advanced weapons being delivered, we know something is about to happen here. And if you notice, they do this very slowly and methodically over time. They've been doing this since February. And here we are very close to August right now. And we need to keep an eye on this. We see a UK parliamentary report finds U.S. allies are covertly funding the Islamic State. Really? I mean, we've been talking about this. We know it's being done. We know the Islamic State, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, they're all part of the network. The proxy army for the United States government central bankers. We know Saudi, Qatar, all the rest of the coalition forces, they support all of this. They fund them. And what we're seeing right now is they're getting prepared and ready for something big. Now, France, they're going to be deploying the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier to the Middle East the end of this summer. So we have a Russian aircraft carrier. We have the U.S. with their aircraft carriers and their strike groups in the Mediterranean. France is sailing their aircraft carrier up to this area. They're building a base inside of Syria without the Syrian government's permission. The U.S. is building two bases inside of Syria without the Syrian government's permission. We have the Incirlik base in Turkey being used by Saudi, by France, by the UK, by the US, by Germany. They're bringing in more military assets. And what we're seeing right now is that all of this is being built up for a specific purpose. Because think about it. The Islamic State, they've lost the edge in Syria and Iraq. The Iraqi forces have pushed the Islamic State back. They lost their territory. 40% went down to 10%. We see in Syria, the Syrian armed forces and the Russian forces have been pushing the Islamic State back. And during this whole entire period, the U.S. and the coalition forces, they're bringing in more military assets and more troops into the area. For what reason? To get the Islamic State all of a sudden? Because as we know, they went a year and a half of doing absolutely nothing, actually expanding the territory of their proxy armies. And now all of a sudden, they need to bring in more to stop the Islamic State? No. They're bringing in more for something else. They're bringing and doing all of this for something completely different. It has nothing to do with the Islamic State. It has to do with going after Assad. When will this start? Don't know the exact date. But when we look at the indicators, it tells us something. It tells us that something's on its way. Not just in the Middle East, but it's being ginned up in the Pacific, in Eastern Europe, and even here in the United States. Because we realize the economy, it's deteriorating and it's getting worse and worse. There's statistical numbers that they keep throwing at us. They don't even make sense anymore with what the economy is doing. I mean, think about it. The Fed came out with their beige book telling us that retail, real estate, and everything else is fine. And people know that unemployment numbers, they don't even make sense. So how do you believe the rest? You don't. We see the U.S. Capitol. It was locked down for the second time this week. They're getting prepared to bring in more troops around government buildings, maybe to extend the fences, the buffer zones, to add security, because they know what's coming. They know there's going to be riots. They know the system is about to crash. It's their system. They know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly when they're going to bring it down. They know that the system can't go on forever. They know they need to start war to take all eyes off of what's going on. And this is why they've been keeping the stock market continually being pumped up by having the central banks pump in a lot of free money to drive the market as high as they possibly can, because they need everyone distracted from what is about to happen. And what's about to happen is a collapse, chaos, war, all at the same time. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.